We can't. Welcome back to the Combo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jarduli here.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Cheese Slice is there in the nick of the times on the ones and twos. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We have limited time. As you know, Fam is back on the ground in Moscow, killing it. Fam, you got to keep us informed what goes on with Prigozhin, because we were trying to figure out where he was. Somebody said he was trying to get away from Belarus. Robert Barnes and Duran were doing like a debriefing of the whole situation. A lot of people are talking about what's going on. They were saying that Prigozhin, he might have been excused from this crime, but there's other crimes they can eventually go after him for. You described it as a mutiny, not a coup. I think that was the best way to describe it. It all ended so quickly. People like Mario on the Fall, CNN, they were upset. There was no civil war. They thought they were getting a whole weekend full of stuff to get to misinform people. But, they only got a couple hours, fam. So please, if you hear anything, keep us informed with the whole Prigozhin Wagner situation.
Yeah, I'll call Prigozhin later and I'll inform all of you. Right after I talk to Putin. So that's what people think. I don't know. But the whole Prigozhin situation is still worth talking about, which is why I'm going to have Brian Berletic and Vanessa Beeley on Friday at 6 p.m. Moscow time, because it's very late. Brian is 4 hours ahead of us from Moscow, so it has to be pretty early. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what we're going to talk about today, Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and the projection of that. And we'll also talk about the implications in Syria, the things that are really hot in Syria right now, with Russia helping Syria out to go against basically these U.S. NATO-backed radical elements. So that's also happening too. And also the move to Belarus, which is another thing that is indicative that there's something going on behind the scenes with Prigozhin. But I don't necessarily believe it was some sort of 5D chess move by Russia. Still, I'm not convinced that they would literally go this far to do something like that. But if they were to have gone that far, only a few would know, maybe like 2 or 3 people. So it is really hard to say. This is one that has stumped pretty much everybody. And nobody knows really exactly what happened. Everybody has a theory. I'm in between. I don't think it was everything that we were told, but I also don't think it was a full-on psyop like some people are claiming. So anyway, we'll discuss more of that, fam. But let's start out with our favorite guy, Elliot Abrams, who is a Trump guy. He was part of the Trump administration, but
he's a Reagan guy.
To show you,
he's
a Reagan. That's exactly it. Yeah. So, okay, exactly. It just goes to show you that it doesn't matter who becomes president. And this is why, again, I'm really not that excited about the U.S. election because this is really like not changing anything. The foreign policy doesn't change. That's that.
Yeah.
Why don't you take us into that?
They don't know who Elliot Abrams is. I was talking about him yesterday at the parade, and a lot of people didn't. Some people did, but a lot of people didn't. There was a few of us like, can you believe this guy? He's like a blood-sucking vampire that just won't fucking go away. Elliot Abrams, who was once eventually charged for lying about the Iran-Contra scandal. Let's bring up the antiwar.com article over here, Cheese Slice, and we'll get rolling on this. Dave DeCamp, he does some amazing work, So it says Biden nominates Elliot Abrams to Public Diplomacy Commission. Abrams led the Trump administration's failed regime change effort in Venezuela. Remember, he tried to whack him with a drone and covered up atrocities in Latin America in the 1980s. That was with the Iran-Contra scandal. President Biden announced Monday that he will nominate Elliot Abrams to the bipartisan United States Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy, fam. CNN has reported Abrams is a neoconservative hawk who led the Trump administration's failed regime change effort, which involved crushing economic sanctions that are still in effect today, besides Biden giving Chevron a limited license to pump oil in the country. Toward the end of Trump's presidency, Abrams was also assigned as the U.S. top Iran envoy, where he oversaw a sanctions policy designed to prevent President Biden from re-entering the nuclear Iran deal. Fam, do you got anything to say about that just off the jump right there so far? I mean, because that shit is laughable right off the bat.
Yeah, so Abrams is not loved by any anti-imperialist. I know any of our friends that have been to Latin America because he was responsible for the attempt to coup Venezuela, and of course that failed. But I mean, this is a guy that is just a hawk. He's one of the worst, most proliferous hawks there is, and he like as Pasta mentioned earlier, he's from the Reagan era, but again, this is talking about the U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. foreign policy will remain whether it's Biden or Trump. People like Abrams get to stay in power, and so this just goes to show you how the apparatus here works. People like Abrams, the State Department, the intelligence apparatus, they get to continue doing what they've always done. In fact, they get raises and they get higher positions as time goes by, and it also shows you that in spite of everything that's happening right now, the shift that is happening around the world, that is extremely visible from this side of the world towards a multipolar, cooperative foreign policy among many countries. Countries that seek to have that with the United States, not just with each other, but with the United States. The United States is not wanting to go along with that. So that this is also a clear sign of that on the more macro level.
I think it's easy. You can even say right now that we found maybe a area in which Biden's better than Trump. It's Latin America. Every single time you just start looking under the hood, and as you put in the doc today, we'll show you how Trump doubled down on the bullshit. Like saying these things that are just openly where he's manufacturing consent. If he ain't a wolf in sheep's clothing, I don't know what is. But I am so against Trump and his policies in Latin America. His last week of his candidacy, his presidency, excuse me, he slapped Cuba with extra hard sanctions, labeled them a state sponsor of terrorism, which is just ridiculous to do that in Cuba. I think there's like 2 knifings a year there, fam, on average. It's a different culture. You know this. We walk through the streets of Havana. They might be going through some hard times, but the people themselves are just amazing and loving. And I never felt threatened or in danger at any time. So for them to label that, that's ridiculous. And we'll kind of go into it a little bit. Let me just read the rest of this. Abrams is notorious for his role in covering up the atrocities committed by the U.S.-backed forces in Latin America during the Reagan administration and in the 1980s, most notably the El Mozate massacre in El Salvador, which we know about these death squads. Over 800 civilians were killed by U.S. trained forces. And at the the time, Abrams praised the death squad and disputed the death toll. In 1991, Abrams pled guilty to lying to Congress about the Iran-Contra affair, but was pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. Of course he was. Abrams also served in George W. Bush's administration as a Deputy National Security Advisor from 2005 to 2009. He currently works for the Council on Foreign Relationships as a senior fellow for the Middle Eastern Studies. You can take that one down. Cheese slice. I had enough. I don't want to read anymore. It's just nauseating that they allow these people to get anywhere close to these positions. And it doesn't make a difference. They can commit crimes. They can be in trouble. They'll just get pardoned and continue to do.
They don't allow them, Pasta. They place them specifically.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Credit where credit's due, fam. At one point, we thought the squad was pretty decent. One time, we even said that Ilhan Omar might have been in the lead in the running for the best squad member at one point, going after APEC with the bling bling. She also did this. Check this out. This is Ilhan Omar back in the days when the Trump administration was appointing, nominating Elliot Abrams.
Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. On February, that was not a question. That was the I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was
Members
not
of
a
this
question.
Committee can attack
On
a
February
witness
8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
that was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S. trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
Yes or no?
No.
I will
sorry, Mr.
I will
Chairman,
take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interests, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether you, under your watch, a genocide will take place and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had
Yeah.
for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Fam, I don't know. After hearing it right now, I don't think it was as good as when we first watched that a while ago. I mean, there's different ways. I
Yes.
think she could have got in there in pride and said a few things. But your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, she still does the whole, there's no doubt that the American foreign policy is to help the people of Venezuela find their democracy, because Venezuela is not a democracy according to the United States, which is such a great democracy. I mean, she still goes back on that. And that is what the role of people like Ilhan Omar and the squad is to provide a pseudo alternative to the neoliberal contingent that isn't really that much of an alternative. It is just essentially better sounding, but leaves the open door foreign policy that is still the Monroe Doctrine led. It's still the same type of policy, but they do get off at going after Republicans, which is why this happened during the Trump administration, rather than you'll see it happen very much during the Biden administration when there's a Democrat. So they do these things to sort of, rally the progressives in the Democratic Party or the people that believe that there.
Is she frozen? All right, she's going to have to come out and come back in probably. So just put up Kennedy's tweet really quick because we haven't heard much from the squad this time, but you can see Kennedy's out there, and he's got this out here. Can you see so we can show his name real quick? Slide it down a little bit. Thank you. President Biden has appointed disgraced neocon Elliot Abrams to his diplomacy commission, infamous for his support of El Salvador's death squads in the 1980s. Abrams was convicted in 1989 of lying to Congress about his criminal role in the Iran-Contra affair. This is something to pay attention to. When the Libertarian Party candidate comes in, and we know that Cornel West is good in foreign policy, but whose head is there more? Who can actually, push the agenda to make some leeway and some headway, I should say, with some of the countries in Latin America? Like, that would be a good question to all three candidates, whether it be Cornel West, whether it be RFK, whether it be the Libertarian candidate. Where do you see an area and opportunity to build some bridges with a country in Latin America and hear what they have to say? But being understanding and being on top of it is very important. Look what it says in the Common Dreams article. Totally indefensible. Biden nominates death squad backer Elliot Abrams to the diplomacy panel. Excuse me. Elliot Abrams, enemy of human rights, apologist for mass murder, should have no place within spitting distance of any Democratic administration in any capacity. So I wanted to bring that up. I thought that was pretty cool. Part of the Common Dreams article. Now we have the Trump on Venezuela, right? So, a lot of people say that he's the biggest peace candidate out there. It's just ridiculous. And they always said he was one of the most peaceful presidents. He didn't start any new wars. He didn't end any. And he sure as hell fucking made a lot of people in Latin America suffer. And like I said, this is the one area maybe where Joe Biden was better than Donald Trump was Latin America. I'm starting to see a lot of examples of that. Not that say that Biden was any good to end anything. He might have eased some of the pain when it came to Cuba, now in Venezuela. But look what Biden says about, as if it's America's decision and we're allowed to sweat these people out. And people just go along with this. This was what I was talking about the anti-communist, anti-socialist kind of rhetoric. That's what it leads to. It leads to manufacturing of consent for rhetoric like this. Donald J. Trump.
How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. But now we're buying oil from Venezuela, so we're making a dictator very rich. Can you believe this? Nobody can believe it. Their oil is garbage. It's the worst you can get. Tar. It's like tar. And to refine it, you need special plants. And these people, how about we're buying oil from Venezuela?
Cheese Slice, can you put the volume all the way up on that? Play it again now from the beginning with Pam here.
Venezuela was ready to collapse. How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. But now we're buying oil from Venezuela, so we're making a dictator very rich. Can you believe this? Nobody can believe it. Their oil is garbage. It's horrible. The worst you can get. Tar. It's like tar. And to refine it, you need special plants. And these people, how about we're buying?
Fam, it's just so casually. How about this? We would have taken an oil. We would have had that oil. Would have been ours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I was saying before was this is why. So Trump exists essentially because you have people like the squad that pretty much just are useless. And these reformist ideas don't literally ever work out because you're still in the same system. And, Lenin talked about this many times before. Now, when we talk about Donald Trump presents this idea that there is this populist movement in the country, which I think there is, but he still centers it around the same type of foreign policy that we have the authority to take over anybody's natural resources, that it's America first, but it's an America first also outside of the domestic scene, meaning like in order to succeed, we have to take from other countries in disrespect their national sovereignty in this way, which is not a very it's not a good business mentality, number one, because you really achieve a lot more through cooperation. And we've seen China achieve relations in Africa, relations in Latin America, and BRICS is continuing to expand precisely because people are more interested in an economic cooperation that benefits multiple people instead of a unilateral type of situation that we've seen in the last 50, 60, 70 years via the United States and the West. So when he talks about taking Venezuela's oil nonchalantly to his crowd, he's specifically talking to people who are fearful of any sort of outside influence and who only blame immigrants, who only blame everybody else, but don't really understand how we got there, how we have a massive influx of immigrants. This is the same thing that's happening in France, where you have people blaming a bunch of these African migrants, which there are certain elements that are coming in specifically, but that's also being done with a certain agenda by certain people. But the vast majority of people it's been reported, having a lot of these attacking and doing all these sorts of things are actually French. The French have been protesting forever because of neoliberal austerity policies. Where they're like really facing massive inflation, just a decline in life in general. And so instead of really looking at the imperialist policies of France, the imperialist policies of the United States, they blame immigrants. So Trump is really smart in terms of he knows who his audience is and who he's speaking to. And he knows that it's going to sound really good to people who really want to just focus on everybody else being the problem and, just Americans just being victims to these crazy immigrants, that everything will be resolved in that way. And I'm not saying this in terms of, really getting into that back and forth. I'm saying this is a reality here. The foreign policy is really what we have to stop in order for people to really stay in their countries, which is exactly what they would do is if we weren't interfering. And none of that gets talked about on the right on purpose, because it would actually present a solution, and it would present a contradiction to what the purpose of the Republican Party is. It's not really to oppose the Democratic Party. It's just to continue the back and forth with zero change in foreign policy.
Yep. I think you have a tweet up there. Cheese Slice, let's bring that up there. Fan made a tweet. A tweet. And then I also added in him talking about not letting communists into this country as well. I don't think we've gone over that. So
I've already said this, right? Like the U.S. boasts about democracy, but really we're talking about massive inflation. I was just in the U.S. It's so expensive, even in Florida. Florida has gotten ridiculously expensive. People have moved there from New York and California, making the housing market go up. And of course, you have these agencies, these gigantic corporations that are buying up all the property. You have a massive inflation, stagnant wages, all of these things. And that's not due to immigration. That's due to the lack of attention being paid to domestic policies. We're not producing anything. We're literally importing everything we have. And the dollar is facing a crisis because everybody else wants to trade in their own currencies. And BRICS just announced that they're also going to create a new currency for BRICS. And all of these people are so interested in doing that because it benefits their own national currency. So what we're seeing here is a mixture of things coming in and affecting the United States. But clearly it doesn't matter, because whoever becomes president is going to have to follow the same type of foreign policy, because that is the agenda. The national security state apparatus and the State Department and these clandestine agencies are really the ones running things. And if you don't know that by now, just take a look at how our foreign policy has barely shifted in the last 5-6 presidents.
Yeah. Let's play that video of Donald Trump. Another reason not to vote for Donald Trump. He's just ridiculous. He's God-fearing. No, it's the next one on the dock. Cheese Slice. These God-fearing communists, these God-hating communists, and these God-hating socialists. What are we gonna do with them, fam? So we got the next one coming up. I just put it in the doc. You got a cheese slice? There you go. Take a look at this. Get the volume up. I don't know if you've seen this yet, fam. This is pretty funny.
Made them competitive. Today, I'm announcing a new plan to protect the integrity
Volume
of
up.
the immigration system. Federal law prohibits the entry of communists and totalitarians into the United States. But my question is, what do we do with the ones that are already here that grew up in it? I think we have to pass a new law for them. Using federal law in Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, I will order my government to deny entry to all communists and all Marxists. Those who come to and join our country must love our country. We want them to love our country. We don't want them when they want to destroy our country. Welcome to America. We want to destroy your country. Thank you very much. So we're going to keep foreign Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America. We're keeping them out of America.
I have good news for Donald Trump. They're already not living in America. Anybody that's an actual Marxist or communist probably doesn't want to live in the United States because it's a very right-wing country. So good news for the Donalds and everybody else. You really don't have a lot. What you do have is a lot of liberals and a lot of Frappuccino, self-appointed so-called Marxists, which aren't really Marxists. They're just liberals who believe in these crazy social justice. It's not even social justice because that whole thing has been maligned as well. It's more of symbolic bullshit that they tend to uphold, things like hyper focusing on trans issues, hyper focusing on pronouns, hyper focusing on all this stuff that isn't really something that actual, anti-imperialist Marxists really focus on. They focus on economics. And this is exactly what we've been talking about because we've been to countries that are socialist in their mindset, in their policies, like Nicaragua, like Cuba, like Venezuela. They don't really focus on that sort of thing. They tend to be conservative socially. These are things that you wouldn't know if and then there's, of course, it's really easy to call Biden a Marxist because it's funny to people who know that Biden is a neoliberal. I mean, he's just, he's closer to being a Republican than anything else with just terrible neoliberal policies. And of course, this social crap that's taking over the Liberal Party. But that has nothing to do with Marxism. So by using this sort of commies are coming to get us thing, you have the new opening, of course, towards manufacturing consent towards a new conflict with China. Because again, as we've said it from the beginning, all of these people that are criticizing the liberal agenda against Russia are going to go right back and send all this money that they don't want to go to Ukraine to Taiwan because they see China as this communist threat. But China is really more of an economic threat, not an ideological threat. It's an economic threat because we're not producing and we're not making alliances. And China is doing just that.
I just wonder how he's going to be able to do this and log people down that are coming from Latin America. He's going to find out what party they were previously in. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do to figure this one out. Jim Garrison left a $5 tip. It says, nice Chania touch fee. Chania?
China.
That's not with an A. It's with a Y. CHY. China. It's a nice China touch. Fam, I love China. I don't know what you're talking about. I love it.
I love China. I love China.
I love China too. Anyways, let's get to the next section. Thank you, Cheese Slice, for putting that up there for us. Makes it a lot easier. And thank you for the super rate contribution, guys. If you can go over to Rockford for $14.99 a month, you know the deal. Go over there. That is our free speech platform. We also have a Rumble that's kicking it today. Got about 40 people hanging on out. You guys, we need you to do the continuing of the sharing. We're still demonetized. We're still getting banned. I mean, God, I was looking up the Cornel West video and they have it hidden. So they buried that one. But that's a good interview if you haven't seen that yet. And remember, this Friday, Fam's going to be here with Vanessa and Brian, and they're going to have a great conversation. So join that show this Friday if you haven't already made plans. Fam, what do we got going on over here now?
All right, so this is something that has been discussed ad nauseum, but it's of course in all of Western media because they are doing what they do best. This is what they do every time. They project, right? So they accuse whoever the enemy is of doing something that they are actually planning on doing. And of course, a Western media parrots this, but this is really like the State Department and NATO. Now, NATO has obviously been at fault for the Bucha massacre, for the Kakhovka Dam, for the blowing up of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. We know this. There is ample evidence, not just by journalists, but also by whistleblowers that have talked about it, by independent investigators of what they did in Nord Stream 1 and 2. Added to the fact that Russia would not blow up their own pipelines because why would they? Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is the largest nuclear power plant in the world. It would make Chernobyl look like nothing. It is also under the control of Russia. Russia has zero desire to blow up a nuclear power plant that is under their control. Why would they do that? And going off of that, the extent that doing the consequences of blowing up a power plant of that magnitude would just completely go all the way into Ukraine, into Belarus, into other parts of this area. It just doesn't make any sense. But somehow Zelensky went on and is spreading this propaganda. And then, of course, the entire Western media and their propagandists decided to do the same thing. So first, let's hear what Zelensky or Zelensky said, because he really just laid this out there and looked like an idiot. So I'll just read it real quick. Now we have information from our intelligence service that the Russians placed explosives like objects on the roof of several power plant units of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. This is what Zelensky announced. And let's go ahead and listen to what he said, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it, okay?
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Щойно завершив розмову з
Oh,
паном
this one's not
президентом
translated.
Франції Макроном.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. This one's not translated, so we're not going to show this one. But this is basically the gist of what he said. And he was on. They played this video all over the place. He plays this video on CNN. And if you don't speak Ukrainian, apologies for that. So if you do find the video, I'll post it if I do find the video. But what's most important is that you understand they planted the seed of Russia's going to do this, blah, blah, blah. But Russia was ahead. Before any of this happened, they were saying Ukraine's going to put out a false flag where they're going to say Russia did this, and then they're actually going to do it. And they know this because, again, this has been done before countless times now to Russia. And Russia always says they're going to do this, and then they do it. So the other propagandist that really got a lot of flack online is Luke Harding, because Luke Harding is out there, right? And he's on the Ukrainian side, and he's covering and doing this propaganda. He's one of the biggest, NATO propagandists out there right now in Western media. He's not a journalist, but he is posing as one. So he said the situation, and this is what he tweeted, the situation at Zaporozhye nuclear power station behind me yesterday is alarming. Kiev says the Russians have placed explosives today on top of reactors 3 and 4 ahead of a possible false flag operation. Russian Telegram channels report an imminent Ukrainian attack.
I think I can see something, fam. I'm squinting. Can you see it from there? Look, fam, you can see it, right? The Russians, the Ruskies.
Yeah, they're there. Is he in Alaska with our friend over there?
I think that Cheese Slice found the Zelensky video with the words, with the translation.
Oh, okay. Great. So we can go back and hear that. So
Let's
let's
throw
do
that up,
that.
Cheese Slice. Go full screen. We'll go full screen over here with these guys.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Щойно завершив розмову з паном президентом Франції Макроном. І це вже треті міжнародні переговори за сьогодні після розмов з генеральним секретарем НАТО та прем'єр-міністром Швеції. Головне – наша оборона, фронт, зброя, можливості наших воїнів. Я вдячний партнерам за розуміння наших потреб. Домовились про нові оборонні пакети. І, до речі, я дякую Еммануелю за те, що сьогодні почала надходити та зброя, про яку ми домовлялися. Ракети, танки. Але, звичайно, говорили сьогодні і про більш стратегічні речі, про те, яким буде безпековий фундамент Європи після цієї війни і нашої перемоги. Щоб мир настав швидше і був тривалим, чесним, справжнім, російське зло повинно бачити, яку межу для амбіцій Кремля встановимо ми. Саме ми, усі вільні європейські нації, усі в нашій євроатлантичній спільноті, а не російські терористи та будь-які їхні шантажі та агресії. Ми щодня додаємо змісту саміту НАТО, який відбудеться у Вільнюсі вже наступного тижня. Я вдячний усім нашим партнерам, які працюють разом з нами на посилення альянсу, а отже, на безпеку в Європі, реальну безпеку. Сьогодні в розмовах з президентом Франції, з прем'єр-міністром Швеції та з генсеком НАТО скоординували наші кроки перед Вільнюсом. Провів і кілька нарад з урядовцями та нашою командою міжнародників Офісу щодо підготовки до зовнішньополітичних заходів, які відбудуться найближчим часом. Дуже важливо щодо ситуації на Запорізькій атомній станції. Зараз увесь світ має бути свідомий того, що спільна безпека повністю залежить від глобальної уваги до дій окупантів на станції. Росія повинна чітко усвідомлювати, світ бачить, до яких сценаріїв готуються терористи. І світ готовий реагувати. Радіація – це загроза для всіх. Для всіх у світі. І атомна станція повинна бути повністю убезпечена від будь-яких радіаційних інцидентів. Сьогодні рівно 16 місяців, як російські військові повністю контролюють територію та споруди Запорізької АЕС. У різних держав світу є власні розвідувальні та інші можливості, щоб точно знати, що відбувається і хто в цьому винен. Зараз від нашої розвідки ми маємо інформацію про те, що на даху кількох енергоблоків Запорізької атомної станції російські військові розмістили предмети, схожі на вибухівку. Можливо, щоб імітувати удар по станції, можливо, у них якісь інші сценарії, але в будь-якому випадку світ бачить і не може не бачити, що єдиним джерелом небезпеки для Запорізької атомної станції є саме Росія і ніхто інший. На жаль, не було вчасної і масштабної реакції на теракт проти Каховської гідроелектростанції. Це може надихати Кремль на нове зло. Зупинити його – це обов'язок усіх в світі, і ніхто не може залишитись осторонь, бо радіація нікого не залишає осторонь. Я дякую пану президенту Макрону за увагу до ситуації на ЗАЕС і за готовність робити все необхідне, щоб гарантувати безпеку. Ще одне. Сьогодні Росія вкотре ударила по Харківщині, по місту Первомайський. Ймовірно, ракета «Іскандер», пошкоджено 8 звичайних багатоповерхівок, більше 40 людей отримали поранення, із них 12 діти, 2 немовлят, їм менше року. Станом на цей час рятувальники разом з поліцейськими ще проводять обхід пошкоджених будинків. Усім, хто був поранений цим ракетним ударом, буде надано всю необхідну допомогу. І за цей удар ворог відповідатиме, як і за всі інші їхні удари. Російські терористи хочуть стати взірцевими в тому, як вони знищують життя. А ми ж станемо взірцевими у тому, як життя захищаємо, і як потім життя відповідає справедливо і неминуче на кожен завданий удар кожному терористу. Нацисти намагалися сховати світ правосуддя. І доволі довго, але багатьох із них знайшли і досі притягають до відповідальності. рашистів зловимо значно швидше. І, до речі, зараз у мене ще буде нарада з міністром внутрішніх справ Клименком та керівником Служби безпеки Малюком щодо нових викликів нашій безпеці і щодо загальної ситуації. Була сьогодні нарада також із розвідкою. Знаємо, як ставити терористів на місце. Дякуємо усім нашим воїнам. Слава Україні!
Slava Ukraine, fam. Slava Ukrainia. Dude, they want you to believe that they're going to tell you that the Russians who captured this nuclear plant are going to blow it up, even though they have control of it for whatever reason, and their intelligence is giving them that information. And you got to at least admit, fam, they're staying consistent to the bullshit. In fact, I think he even kind of called the Russians Nazis at one point in that kind of argument there. Like, no, you're the Nazi, donkey. Go ahead, fam.
Yeah, I mean, it's just comical because if you look at how Vladimir Putin does his speeches, it's very much like he's a politician and he's there and he takes like questions, and or it's just filmed, at the Kremlin or somewhere along those lines. With Zelensky, it is obviously a production. There's a lot of editing, cutting. There's a lot of there's clearly some green screens. It's clearly like if you film like a production video, it's just so obvious. The guy doesn't do anything, first of all, without the approval of NATO and the United States. So clearly they got together and they formulated this whole plan. And this is what Russia has said, that there was the intelligence, the CIA is planning a false flag on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And you can tell because he is literally saying things that the State Department has already repeated, that the entire their Western, media propagandists are also repeating, and they all have the same exact lines. They're all saying the same exact thing. But the reality is, as Pasta mentioned, Russia has zero interest in bombing their own nuclear power plant, just like they wouldn't blow up their own pipelines, just like they wouldn't blow up their own dam. So all of these assertions that Zelensky is making is clearly just to have this PR stunt to get more money and get more support, using the rhetoric of children, using this whole thing. It's a whole production to manufacture consent for this false flag. But the problem for them is that people are seeing right through this, right? And you have to look at the timing as well. This is something we talked about earlier today. The timing of this is right before the NATO summit, which will take place in Lithuania. And at the NATO summit, of course, Zelensky is demanding that Ukraine be admitted into NATO. And everybody else is saying, we're not going to do that because that would escalate the conflict. So even though they have basically admitted this is a proxy war with Russia, they refuse to actually go on that. And, I talked to Mark Sloboda about this shortly. That would really mean Article 5 would be invoked, and basically it would just leave them no option than to say, hey, now this is a war of us against Russia, even though we know it is, right? But that would really escalate things. So they keep dangling this carrot of, we're going to make you a part of NATO, we're going to make you a part of NATO, but it's not going to happen. And it's definitely not going to happen anytime soon, like at the NATO summit. The other thing that just happened is the failure of Western media to paint Russia as entirely weak, to paint them as having had a civil war. They failed to actually have that, because that didn't happen. They didn't have a civil war. Putin did resolve the conflict, along with, obviously, Lukashenko from Belarus. They were able to reach this agreement. However, people may view how that made Russia look. At the end of the day, Russia was still continuing its operations for the special military. They were still doing what they were supposed to do, and none of that got disrupted. In fact, in the last 24 hours, there have been countless Ukrainian soldiers that have died. And they are really, if you talk to anybody, from anybody that is on the ground reporting or that has analyzed what's going on, everybody has assessed that Ukraine is losing this conflict. So when Zelensky says, when we win, that is just complete and total BS, because they are nowhere near winning. And so this whole thing is just being done to divert attention from their failure in the battlefield, and to sort of put the attention on Russia. Oh, Russia's going to do this, we need more support, blah, 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 because they don't have anything else to do.
It's also to keep the scam money going. Like, that's why I put up Abrams' comment. Money, 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 money. Give me money, money, money. They want to keep it going as long as they can, before they pick it up and move it to Taiwan. What do we got up next here? Good, cheese slice. Throw it up. Yeah. Nope, not for me. There you go.
Okay, so this one, I wanted to point this out because even the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency admitted that Zelensky is wrong because he said they did not observe any mining activity. They're saying that Russia is doing this on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And so this is what the approximate statement was. If you can just scroll up a bit so I can read it. He said, at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, as you know, we have a permanent presence and the permanent mission. I have been in contact with them today. We are aware of Zelensky's statement, but the Russian side has also made similar claims. A nuclear power plant should never be attacked under any circumstances, and it should not be used as a military base. During our latest inspections, we did not observe any mining activity, but we remain extremely vigilant. As you know, the Ukrainians are currently engaged in counterattacks. I am heading to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant as we speak. I visited the site a few weeks ago, and the fighting is very close. We cannot afford to relax. We will continue to keep you updated on the situation there. So pretty much discrediting what Zelensky said. And again, this is the International Atomic Energy Agency. So it really doesn't make, we don't have to play the video. It really doesn't make any sense to continue promoting this, but that's all you see in media. Russia, if like, I noticed it, like how everybody, that's all they get. When I was in the United States, like that's all people get. Like people, when the Prigozhin thing was happening, people were like, you need to never go back to Russia. Oh my God, Russia. Like they were
the last
freaking
flight
out.
was out. Like, they're canceling all flights out of Moscow, fam. There's no more flights getting in. Things are.
I was worried about not being able to get back in.
Yeah.
Like if like they're, they were the American government wasn't going to let me out. Like I was more worried about that, not not the other way around. But people just they really aren't getting the right information. Whereas over here, you get a completely different sense of the information.
Well, fam, if you want to get the right information from Putin, you should ask one of Putin's friends, Comrade, Misty. Putin's you can throw this up, cheese slice. There you go. Putin's buddy.
Yeah, she's
If
Putin's
it
buddy.
happens,
She
please
knows
understand.
best.
NATO bombs Zaporozhye.
Yeah, and again, like this is who has the vested interest in going after Zaporozhye. It's not Russia.
Yeah.
So there's that. And again, look at the history, right? And this is what I was talking about when I posted my tweet. That who really has the interest in going after the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, right? And I said that it's the ones that lied about the WMDs, 9/11, Vietnam, killed JFK, I forgot RFK Sr., MLK, Fred Hampton, and Malcolm X, jailed Julian Assange, bombed the Nord Stream pipelines, who fund Nazis, and also let's add who fund radical actual Al Qaeda in all over the Middle East, who overthrew governments in Africa and Latin America. Those are probably the ones that are planning to have a false flag to blow up Zaporozhye, because that is what history and past experience indicates. There is absolutely no logical assessment. Even if you didn't know anything about what we just discussed, you could just go back to history and have a deductive reasoning based on what we know. So that's the reality there.
Common sense also makes it say, like, okay, let's see. Yeah. The Russians have now controlled Zaporozhye for quite some time. It's going to be used for the benefit of the Donbass regions, these independent nations now. Ukraine doesn't want that to happen. Same reason why they blew up the dam. They're going to go out and try to blow it up because they're not using it, and all is crazy and all hell and war. So what else do we have up here now?
In love and war, fam.
In love and war. Hell and war in this case.
So the thing I mentioned this earlier, and I want you guys to look at this map. If or when the regime of Kiev decides to attack the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the resulting fallout will engulf the entirety of Ukraine and large portions of Belarus, Turkey, Romania, and Western Russia. It's not convenient for anybody, but it is most certainly not convenient for Ukraine. It is most certainly not convenient for a lot of the Balkan area. This would be a catastrophic event if it were to happen. This is something serious. I think people a lot, sometimes when we're discussing Zaporozhye, we get into Russia and Ukraine. It would absolutely be devastating for everybody involved. There is nothing really to gain from this, but there's a potential that the State Department and NATO are willing to risk this radioactive explosion to prove their point and try to blame Russia. Do not put it past them. They are absolutely more than willing to do this. And Russia, right now at this moment, is doing everything they can, as said by Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, to stop this, because they have been ahead of this for a while. The FSB did their investigation. And another thing is that Zelensky has admitted that he's in direct conversation with the CIA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just obviously, guys, it's just, as Pasta said, it's common sense here.
There's manufacturing for consent, and we'll get the next clip up soon too of Kiev over there. But there's manufacturing for consent. You know, if they say Russia blew it up, they can get more money, keep the scam going. You know, they don't want them to be in control of that power plant. So yeah, terrible.
And fam, the last part of this section that I wanted to bring up was from yesterday. I hope you guys had fun at your barbecues and spending time with family. It was my grandmother's birthday. She shares the birthday with the United States. However, also what ended up happening was that the U.S. did several dumb things, and U.S. officials also are included in this. So they posted a photo, which is not this tweet, but they posted a photo of a SU, I believe it's an F-17 or F-27 fighter jet, which is a Russian one. And they were talking about American freedom and democracy, and it ended up being a Russian jet. So that was funny. And then they deleted that. But then also the Ukraine celebrated the 4th of July in Kiev by putting a monument, a Russian monument that was symbolic of Russia's defeat of the Soviet army over Nazis, and just completely draped it over the Ukrainian flag and the American flag. One, disrespectful. Two, how dumb are you? So Donbas Babushka Politics posted, Ukraine, the 51st state, celebrates the 4th of July in Kiev. So, yeah, it's quite ridiculous, but that's what they were doing. So yes, Russians were not happy about that, obviously, but I think it just really shows just how ridiculous they go into sucking the teat, let's put it that gently, of the United States and NATO.
Got it. Do we have any more super rays that are in the chat? Do we have those up yet or no? We can go off the next one. Let's go off. Let's get ready for the next section. Fam, there's some shit that was going down. Oh, there it is. Pasta, next time you're in LA, my wife Mel said she would read your cards. Fee. Next time you're in LA, you need to come party with us. Then Steve and I are holding. All right. Holding it down. I'm glad you guys are holding it down. You guys should continue to hold it down. Gregory, I'll hit you up. Thank you so much, guys. You guys can go over to our Rockfin. You know where it's at. ROKFIN. Sign up if you can. Be a member. We also have a Rumble. We got 55 people. It's climbing and watching. About 200 almost watching on the YouTubes. Guys, share it on up. Like it. Give us the help, and let's continue to get it rolling. Fam, what's going on over in the Israeli sector of the world? I mean, I brought a video from Nico House. We can put that up really quickly. He's doing his little that TikTok style videos for Hotspot. You got that, Cheese?
Yes. So let's put up Nico's video, but just to introduce what's going on is Israel has attacked, and they recently stopped this attack, the Jenin refugee camp. And then in retaliation, supposedly a lone person went to Tel Aviv and rammed cars against people and injured somebody, stabbed somebody, which is literally nothing in comparison. And this is something that I discussed yesterday all day, basically on RT, by a gentleman that lives in Palestine. And he was basically saying the vast majority of these isolated attacks that are happening in Tel Aviv are not the Palestinian resistance. It's people that are just angry that there's no justice and they go do this. And Israel uses that to say these are all terrorists. And so this is the circular argument you get when people say, terrorist. And as media, working in media, I see a tendency to talk about, Israel in terms of Israel did this operation, Israel did this. But when it comes to Palestine, the Palestinian jihadists, the Palestinian militants, the Palestinian terrorists, it's just so people don't even realize they're doing it. And this is something I am so watchful about as many times as possible. And I will get into fights with people over this because it is just sickening to me to see how Palestinians are portrayed as terrorists and Israel is just portrayed as military doing operations. They're an occupation. That's exactly what they are. They're an occupation. That is factual, regardless of who, whatever. They are occupying a space. Palestinians do not have any rights, essentially. They're being kept from medical aid. They're being kept from kicked out of their homes in Jenin. The infrastructure was damaged, roads, electricity, water pipes, all of these things. And this is just obviously one example. This has been happening, of course, throughout Palestine. And so Israel recently launched more strikes in Gaza because they say they were targeting Hamas. And that is their go-to. We are targeting Hamas.
They always say that shit. Yeah. Always.
And the reality is the resistance of Palestinians, because everybody that's been older has been killed, is literally kids between the ages of 14 and 18, and then some adult men that are like 25 tops, and women. You really don't have a lot of older men. But Palestinians want people to know that they are not victims, that they are continuing to fight, and they're bleeding, but they're resisting. And that is something people don't understand. When you talk about Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, there's just different factions of the Palestinian resistance. It's not just one faction. And you can't just, people have different points of view within these factions, just like there are different points of view within any sort of group. So let's just go ahead.
Before we play this video, though, I want to say this much too as well. It's like people like, Ilhan, not Ilhan, what's her name? Rashida Tlaib, who says, we're not supporting Hamas, and we, I'm saying, well, Israel created Hamas, and this is something that Ron Paul said on the floor of Congress. They created Hamas because they didn't want to deal with the secular leadership of the Palestinian resistance at the time, which was Yasser Arafat and his movement. We saw a statue of Yasser Arafat in Cuba. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, they didn't want to deal with that, so they created this radical group so they can manufacture consent for attacking any type of Palestinian organized government. And that's why they do this all the time. So let's take a look at Nico's video, and then we'll get into it.
Over 100 Palestinians injured and 10 Palestinians are dead after an Israeli terrorist attack in Jenin. And yes, I said a terrorist attack. Right now, the Israeli military is occupying Jenin, destroying homes, destroying roads, in what is the largest raid in the area in over 20 years. Now, what's the reason behind this Israeli terrorist attack in Jenin? Because Jenin is one of the largest refugee camps in the area, many people that live there are actually Palestinian resistance fighters. Now, the Palestinian resistance fighters never really did anything. However, this is part of a 2-year ongoing operation called Break the Wave. An operation that Israel feels is necessary because, well, a lot of people got together and decided they're sick and tired of the Israeli occupation and the expanding settlements into Palestinian territory. But this is the excuse they use. Not that these soldiers were attacking Israel, but merely that these soldiers were existing in a Palestinian refugee settlement. In other words, this attack was completely unprovoked. I mean, could you imagine if a group of Palestinian fighters just bombed a school or a hospital in Tel Aviv merely because soldiers were existing in Tel Aviv? Israel would literally wipe us off the face of the planet. What makes the situation worse is that Doctors Without Borders is reporting that Israel is destroying roads in any way for ambulances to enter the area in order to help wounded individuals. So not only the people who are volunteering for Doctors Without Borders, but the Palestinians who are there have to pursue on foot through gunfire in order to help people. Israel is even attacking journalists trying to cover what they're doing there because they know they're wrong and they don't want anyone reporting on it honestly. And of course, the U.S. comes out and says, we support Israel's rights to defend itself, leaving out the part where this was completely and totally offensive. Literally, what this is showing us is that Israel is the most well-funded and well-supported terrorist organization in the Middle East.
And they take after the United States. So that's no surprise there. And Nico said it right. It's one of those things where this is a terrorist attack. You will not hear it described as a terrorist attack in media, but it is a terrorist attack. But you will easily hear what happened in Tel Aviv by one person be described as a terrorist attack, which is why I get into fights, because this is exactly what goes on in media across the globe. Nobody is safe when it comes to the way they talk about Israel-Palestine, except the Palestinian activists. And Nico pointed out a few key points here: the destruction of medical supplies, the destruction of these roads. The Jenin refugee camp was already a refugee camp to begin with. After this strike, this terrorist operation, that it became far worse for the people who were already refugees, the people who were already refugees from having their homes bulldozed. So somebody from Brooklyn, New York can come in and take them over, or take over this land. That's exactly what's happening. And so that is why this is a complete and total offensive operation. And it's no surprise the United States, of course, stands behind Israel. And this is precisely why I don't see a separation between the U.S. government's imperialistic policies and Israel, because the United States provides billions of dollars every single year to fund Israel to continue to do this, not just to Palestinians, but to Syrians, and to continue to also promote weapons of war against and nuclear attacks with Iran, because that's who they always blame. And most recently, one of the politicians from Israel, I believe it was the prime minister, told all of the people in Israel to go get guns and to protect themselves against Palestinians. And so when we talk about this, and you have to be careful, because I've even seen it reported in media that, Palestine launched missiles at Israel. Palestine doesn't have any missiles. They literally do not have missiles. That is an impossible thing to say. They have rockets. Yeah. They only have rockets because of the resistance movement, and they have help sometimes from people in Iran and Lebanon and these factions. And that's nothing. That's peanuts compared to what Israel has with the Iron Dome in the United States. So this is obviously something that I do know a lot about. And this is obviously something that I will not stand for information being weaponized in any sort of way.
They use Hamas as a reason to, attack Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They use Hezbollah as a reason to bomb Iran. They occupy the Golan Heights all the time. It's and what do our lawmakers do? They come out, oh, this is Hamas, this is a terrorist group. They've got the people programmed in the United States to think that anybody who's attacking Israel are terrorists. They're freedom fighters fighting for their territory, trying to defend themselves. And like Pham said, there are no missiles. They're handheld rockets that they shoot. And, then Israel will bomb a building or bomb a place and say, hey, the terrorists were hiding behind the people, so that's justification for doing it. It's the same old thing over here. I don't know what you have up there next, Pham, but go ahead and throw that up there, Cheese Slice.
So this is the targeting of the medical center in Jenin, the medical areas. Yeah.
And Doctors Without Borders is reporting on this shit, guys.
So another thing I forgot to mention that Nico did mention as well, this is fact. Journalists, in general, several journalists from different outlets, not Palestinian ones, were attacked. They were shot at, just like, Shireen Abu Akleh was shot at and killed, unfortunately, the Al Jazeera reporter. They were shot at for filming this, because this is something that you hear from anybody that's been to Gaza, where as a journalist you're not safe because they literally don't want this to get out. So Israel does whatever they can, and I'm unfortunately I've had the displeasure of interviewing people who deny that any of this happens. They say, no, Israel never hurts anybody. Oh, Israel has never done this. No, we just go after terrorists. And so it's just that thing that's easily said. So I just want to point out that journalists aren't even allowed to report on these things.
What do we have next?
I think it's another tweet. So these are the people that have been, you can go ahead and play it. These are the people that have been displaced from their homes in Jenin, and they have nowhere to go, which is why the refugee camp was essential to what Israel, to people fleeing from the Israeli occupation, right? Because the whole point of Israel is to erase Palestine. They don't want Palestine there, and then they also obviously have it out with Syria and Iran. Now, Iran's a much more powerful contingent for them to oppose. They have nuclear weapons, which is why you'll always see the United States and Israel talk about Iran not being allowed to have nuclear weapons. But the reality is, I don't think it's going to be as easy for them as Israel thinks. And they're also plagued by their own internal issues, which, by the way, Israel right now has the most right wing. And when I talk about right wing here, I'm talking about actual like right wing fascist elements. And them being Jewish does not escape them from being Zionist and being fascistic in their beliefs. And that is a reality. This is not a hating Jew moment here. This is a Zionist, pointing out the Zionist policies that are just, when you talk about elevating one race or ethnicity above them all, they all fall into the same, whether they're Zionism, fascist, whatever. We're talking about the ethnic cleansing of people. And that's something that can't be denied that Israel is doing at all corners. That's the whole point is for Palestine to stop existing. And there have been numerous reporters
the
that have
maps
seen
are really
that too.
intense, fam, by the way. When you're talking about not existing, showing those colorful maps about how Israel and Palestine was there, and now you look at it now, they're continuing, and it's not even like it's like, you know, people from New York are showing up in Israel and forcing people off their land because they're Jewish.
Yeah.
And this is a very sad situation over here. Look at that, 2017 all the way to the right. It's terrible.
Yeah.
The last clip from Vanessa.
This is, I believe, this one is from Eva first.
Eva.
So Eva has this tweet, and she said, "The only terror attacks in occupied Palestine, Israel, are committed by the Israeli army or by the illegal Jewish colonists against Palestinians. Palestinian resistance is not terrorism." So this is another point of view, especially from the activist elements of Palestine, where you can't compare the people who are resisting the attacks that are unprovoked, as Nico had said, and call that terrorism. You can say, well, maybe this person shouldn't have done that, whatever, but the reality is you're going to get that and much more. Palestinians could be doing much more, but they haven't gone outright, as Nico said, and bombed civilian hospitals in Tel Aviv. They could, but that's what Israel is doing. So when people try to both sides the situation, you're not doing good journalism because it's not on equal standing. And this is what I say about Donbass and Russia, Ukraine. When you try to both sides things that are not on equal footing, you're not doing good journalism. You have to tell the truth. If it's not an equal situation, you have to point out the inequalities in that, and that is actually doing the truthful journalism there.
And then the last one.
The last tweet is from Vanessa Beeley, and this is several videos, a video, and I'll just read it. You can play it, and I'll go ahead and read it. And she put, sound as loud as you can. Then imagine the sound 24/7, sometimes high up, sometimes right above your head. Not one drone, multiple drones like angry hornets. They can strike at any moment. The internet stops working when they are directly overhead. This is Vanessa, who is in Syria. Syria constantly gets bombed. Damascus constantly gets bombed by Israel. The ceaseless noise drives you crazy. This was the sound in Gaza when I was there during the 2012 Zionist aggression. Now this is Jenin. This is the criminal entity at work destroying Palestinians and Palestinian homes. So obviously, This is something you can't probably take out of your mind if you've been there like Vanessa, on the ground and have seen this. And of course, when I was in Donbass, uh, just hearing the hum of the strikes that were coming in, and people getting so used to it that they barely blink, or that they're on this mental level where they have to go down and protect themselves. This is not a way to live. This is just based on, not even just the physical injuries that you could potentially face, but the psychological aspect as well. And that's one thing that a lot of the people who have worked at UN relief centers that are working in Jenin right now talk about the effects that it has on the Palestinian children, which is the majority of people that are pretty much left in Palestine, is great, and it's really bad. So again, this is something that the United States is not just condoning; it is absolutely 100% an arbiter of. It is a provider of this type of action, and this should not be not ignored. It needs to be talked about countlessly, but it needs to be talked about it in the right way, and not in a way that excuses what is being done by Israel under the trope of Judaism, because this is not about going after Judaism. This is about going after the corruption, the fascism, and the Zionism of the Israeli state, the occupation.
No doubt. Just sick shit. I hate the fact that, you're going to have people saying, no, they were provoked. You got Doctors with Borders reporting that they can't even get there, that they're bombing the roads to get in. And I would just think, who's taking the most refugees on, fam? Is it got to be Jordan? Is it got to be Lebanon? Who else is taking most of the Palestinian refugees now? Because
I'm not sure. I know that
area on the map
it's a
is strong.
diaspora.
What's that?
Yeah, it's a diaspora, but a lot of people are being killed. This is what I'm talking about. A genocide. A lot of people aren't allowed to leave. They're not allowed to get medical attention. So how do you get out of that? This is an open air prison. You're a sitting duck there, and that's essentially the goal. And Israel isn't shy. They've said it as much. They do, the way people, when you go to Israel and they talk about Palestinians, they're all terrorists, and they're all, they all need to be eliminated. And that's the huge majority of the sentiment. But that's not necessarily the sentiment of other people of Jewish descent who live in the United States, or people, especially of the Orthodox Jews. They are completely against this, many of them. And this is something that, we have to really be able to talk about. But it seems like we can't talk about it, or we're anti-Semitic. And that is something that I really have a huge issue with, because this is not about anti-Semitism at all.
All right, guys, that's it for today, fam. We don't have time for the last section. I'll have to kind of fit it in somewhere and talk about it. I'm going to go back to talking a lot, too, more about what's going on with the COVID situation, since right now we're still waiting to find out what's going on. It was supposed to be completely declassified, the origins, but right now it seems like the State Department is playing games, and it looks like they want to put the blame on China, fam. So we're going to see a push towards that. I'm going to stay on top of that, what's going on. Also the WHO treaty, because it seems like they're refocusing themselves, or rearranging themselves. That is the whole medical tyranny apparatus people of sorts, that's looking to once again do what they did before, because they didn't pay a price last time. So we're going to be paying attention to that. We'll miss the section today. But guys, if you have a chance, go over to our Rockfin, ROKFIN, sign up. We had almost close to 30 people who are all premium watchers. And if you can be a premium watcher over there, it will be great. Go over there and check it out. Of course, we have our Rumble. We had close to 60 people over there. And YouTube, we cracked over 200. Thank you, guys. Remember, we're being demonetized, shadow banned, and thrown away almost every single day. So you have to pick us up and do that sharing. Remember our Patreon, the Convo Couch. Show your love and appreciation to the fams to help us on out. We got Nicaragua coming up soon, so we'll be talking about that. Going to the reunion of the revolution. What we spoke about in the first section today with Elliot Abrams, what he tried over there, the Iran-Contra scandal. The Contras were the ones who were funded by the CIA and Elliot Abrams, the whole freaking situation over there. And they fought against the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas won the revolution, and we'll be joining them pretty soon to celebrate, fam. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Anything else for today?
No, I'll see you guys tomorrow at I'll be on our tea in the morning for you guys in the East Coast and the West Coast. It'll be morning and afternoon for you guys while I'm there. So have a good night, everybody. We'll see you back on Friday. I will see you on Friday with Vanessa Beeley and Brian Berletic. So tune in for that one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aram, for putting that up there, guys. I am Pasta Jardula.
I'm Fiorella.
And Cheese Slice is on the 1s and 2s, guys. We're out of here.
Come out.